You're fired. Leave my empire, now." The words shattered the silence inside the DeLuca council chamber, like a gunshot. No one moved. Not the dozen capos who had survived bloody wars. Not the corporate executives responsible for billions of dollars in international business. Not the armed guards lining the polished marble walls. Everyone stared at the woman standing quietly beside the conference table, Claire Sullivan, the plus-size executive assistant who had stood behind Lorenzo DeLuca for 4 years. She didn't argue. She didn't ask why. She didn't cry. Across the room, Lorenzo's glamorous fiancée, Vanessa Romano, folded her arms with quiet satisfaction. The faint smile on her lips revealed everything. She had finally won. For weeks, she had insisted there was no room in Lorenzo's life for another woman who always seemed to know his thoughts before he spoke them. Today, he had chosen. Claire slowly unclipped the security badge from her jacket. Then came the encrypted satellite phone, the biometric vault key, the encrypted flash drive she had carried every single day. One by one, she placed each item carefully onto the polished table. The sound echoed through the room louder than anyone expected. Finally, she looked at Lorenzo. There was no anger in her eyes, only exhaustion, only gratitude, only a sadness too deep to be expressed with tears. "Take care of yourself, boss." 4 simple words. Then she turned and walked toward the enormous wooden doors without looking back. No one tried to stop her. No one realized they should, because everyone inside that room believed the same thing. She was only an assistant. Less than 24 hours later, encrypted communications failed. A shipment worth hundreds of millions disappeared between 2 ports. 3 capos arrived at different locations for the same meeting. 2 governors cancelled secret negotiations after waiting hours for Lorenzo to appear at appointments he never knew existed. By sunset, the most powerful mafia empire on the East Coast had begun collapsing. Only then, Lorenzo DeLuca finally understood the terrifying truth. He hadn't dismissed an employee. He had sent away the woman holding his entire world together. For 4 years, Claire Sullivan's day always began before the sun appeared over New York Harbor. At 4:30 every morning, while most of the city still slept beneath the fading glow of streetlights, the lights inside the DeLuca headquarters were already on. She was always the first to arrive. Coffee brewed quietly in the executive kitchen before anyone requested it. Every newspaper had already been marked with articles relevant to Lorenzo's businesses. Weather reports, shipping conditions, political updates, financial markets, airport delays, private intelligence summaries and security alerts were organized into color-coded folders resting neatly on Lorenzo's desk. No one ever asked who prepared them. They simply appeared. By 7 o'clock, Lorenzo entered the building exactly as he had every weekday for years. Power seemed to follow him wherever he walked. Employees straightened immediately. Security personnel lowered their eyes respectfully. Capos interrupted conversations the moment he appeared. He acknowledged almost none of it. His attention naturally shifted toward the woman waiting outside his office, with today's schedule already memorized. "Morning, Claire." "Good morning, boss." She handed him his espresso before he remembered wanting one. "The governor moved tonight's dinner to 8. He nodded. "The Milan investors confirmed." Another nod. "I rescheduled your medical appointment." He stopped walking. "I had one. You forgot." A tiny smile appeared on Lorenzo's face. "I suppose I did." Claire smiled politely. "You always do." The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. Neither of them realized it happened almost every morning. It had become part of the rhythm that kept the empire alive. Inside Lorenzo's office, chaos disguised itself as luxury. Phones rang endlessly. International markets opened. Construction projects demanded approval. Private intelligence reports flooded encrypted servers. Capos requested immediate decisions involving territories stretching from Boston to Miami. Yet Lorenzo rarely appeared overwhelmed. Observers assumed genius, explained everything. They never noticed Claire quietly removing problems before they reached his desk. When two rival suppliers scheduled meetings at the same time, she solved the conflict hours before either arrived. When a senator secretly changed locations for a private negotiation, Claire received the update first and rerouted Lorenzo's convoy without interrupting his current meeting. When one capo's temper threatened to ignite violence during negotiations, she discreetly arranged seating based on years of observing personalities no one else bothered remembering. People praised Lorenzo's flawless leadership. Claire accepted being invisible. It was easier that way. By afternoon, the headquarters resembled a perfectly synchronized machine. Orders traveled across continents. Cargo ships departed on schedule. Luxury hotels prepared for international investors. Private security teams rotated without error. Every department believed another department handled the impossible details. In truth, almost every invisible thread led back to one office: Claire's. Her desk contained no family photographs, no decorations, only carefully labeled folders, encrypted tablets, color-coded notebooks, emergency contact lists she could recite from memory. She remembered birthdays, wedding anniversaries, children's names, food allergies, medication schedules, favorite wines, safe house locations, backup escape routes, emergency landing strips, blood types. She never considered it extraordinary. To Claire, caring simply meant remembering. Late that evening, long after executives had gone home, Lorenzo emerged from another exhausting strategy meeting. The building had become silent. Most lights were already off. Only one office remained illuminated. Claire. She sat surrounded by stacks of contracts, quietly comparing handwritten notes against digital records. "You should have gone home hours ago," Lorenzo said. Without looking up, she answered gently, "I wanted to double-check tomorrow's summit. It can wait." She finally lifted her eyes. "So can sleep." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Lorenzo placed a small paper bag onto her desk. "I passed your favorite bakery." Claire blinked with surprise. "You remembered?" "You've remembered everything for me." He shrugged almost awkwardly. "I figured I could remember one thing." Inside the bag sat a still warm cinnamon pastry. Nothing expensive, nothing dramatic. Yet Claire smiled more sincerely than she had all day. "Thank you." Lorenzo nodded once before walking away. Neither recognized the quiet intimacy hidden inside such ordinary moments. To everyone else, she was simply his assistant. To Lorenzo, she had become something far more important, something so constant. He had stopped noticing she was carrying the weight of his entire world. Spring arrived in New York, wrapped in luxury. The DeLuca headquarters transformed almost overnight. Fresh white orchids appeared in every executive hallway. Private tailors entered and left with expensive garment bags. Florists, jewelers, event planners, and security consultants filled the building with endless discussions about one event: Lorenzo DeLuca's engagement. To the outside world, it was the wedding of the decade. To the mafia families of the East Coast, it was something far more significant. It was an alliance. The DeLuca family controlled ports, international shipping, finance, luxury hotels, and private intelligence. The Romano family possessed deep political influence, judges, senators, and generations of diplomatic relationships hidden beneath legitimate businesses. Their marriage promised peace, or at least the appearance of peace. Everyone celebrated. Everyone except Claire. She spent 3 consecutive nights reorganizing Lorenzo's schedule to accommodate hundreds of new meetings related to the engagement. Venue inspections, private negotiations, security briefings, meetings with foreign investors who suddenly wished to congratulate the future couple. She arranged every detail with her usual precision, never once allowing her personal feelings to interrupt her work. Whenever congratulations echoed through the office, Claire smiled politely, then returned to work. No one noticed the smile never quite reached her eyes. Except Lorenzo. Several times he caught himself watching her longer than necessary. Something felt different. She seemed quieter, not less efficient. Simply further away. He almost asked whether something was wrong. Almost. Instead, another meeting interrupted the thought. The opportunity quietly disappeared. Vanessa Romano noticed everything. Beautiful. Elegant. Perfectly educated. She understood politics better than most senators and could charm a room full of billionaires before dessert arrived. She also possessed one dangerous habit. She observed people before judging them. Within only 3 days inside DeLuca headquarters, she identified the one relationship she could not understand. Every important conversation somehow ended with Lorenzo saying the same words. "Claire, what do you think?" Sometimes it concerned shipping contracts. Sometimes international investments. Sometimes security arrangements. Occasionally, nothing more complicated than deciding which governor could be trusted. Regardless of the subject, his eyes always searched for Claire first, not because she outranked everyone, because he trusted her answer. Vanessa hated that realization. She tested her suspicion repeatedly. One afternoon, during preparations for a charity gala, she deliberately suggested moving the guest arrival time. Lorenzo listened, then instinctively looked toward Claire. Claire hesitated. If arrivals begin 30 minutes later, Senator Marshall will overlap with the Russian delegation. Silence. Vanessa frowned. Claire continued calmly. They've been avoiding each other since the Zurich negotiations. Another pause. Lorenzo nodded. Keep the original schedule. No debate. No discussion. Decision made. Vanessa smiled politely. Inside, jealousy quietly took root. Days became weeks. The pattern repeated everywhere. During financial meetings, Lorenzo asked Claire. Security briefings. He asked Claire. Political negotiations. Again. Claire. Sometimes he didn't even realize he was doing it. Vanessa certainly did. The final humiliation arrived during an engagement celebration attended by dozens of mafia families. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the grand ballroom. Champagne flowed endlessly. Live musicians performed beside marble staircases, while photographers documented every smiling guest. Vanessa stood proudly beside Lorenzo, greeting influential visitors. Everything appeared perfect, until Lorenzo quietly leaned toward Claire. Did we confirm Governor Hayes's dietary restrictions? Claire answered immediately. Shellfish allergy, vegetarian appetizer, red burgundy, not Bordeaux. Lorenzo smiled. I knew you'd remember. Vanessa heard every word. Minutes later, another guest approached. Again, Lorenzo instinctively looked toward Claire for confirmation. Then another, and another. Each glance felt like another invisible wound. By the end of the evening, Vanessa no longer saw an assistant. She saw competition, not romantic competition. Something worse. Trust. The kind of trust impossible to replace. The confrontation came unexpectedly. Claire entered Lorenzo's office, carrying several confidential contracts, requiring immediate signatures. Vanessa was already inside. The atmosphere felt unusually cold. Claire sensed tension immediately. She placed the folders on Lorenzo's desk. These require your approval before 6. Before Lorenzo could answer, Vanessa spoke. Tell me something, Claire. Claire looked up politely. Yes? Do you ever stop acting like you own this office? Silence. Claire blinked. I'm sorry? You answer his questions before everyone else. You interrupt meetings. You decide schedules. You practically run this company. Claire remained calm. I'm only doing my job. Vanessa laughed softly. Your job? Her voice grew sharper. You're an overweight secretary. Several executives passing outside slowed as they heard raised voices. Vanessa continued without mercy. You've convinced yourself you're indispensable, but you're still just an assistant. Claire lowered her eyes. Not from shame, from discipline. She had spent years learning that responding emotionally only created larger problems. I never intended to offend you. That's exactly the problem. Vanessa stepped closer. You don't know your place. Lorenzo finally stood. Enough. The room fell silent. Vanessa turned toward him. No. For weeks I've watched you. You ask her everything. You trust her more than your own fiancé. Every decision, every meeting, every conversation. She pointed directly toward Claire. So choose. The words hung heavily inside the office. If she stays. Vanessa's voice remained perfectly steady. I leave. Nobody spoke. Even the sounds from the busy hallway seemed to disappear. Lorenzo stared at both women. One represented political stability, powerful alliances, peace between families, the future everyone expected him to build. The other had quietly stood beside him through 4 relentless years, never demanding recognition, never asking for anything. Claire looked at him with complete composure. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't crying. She simply waited. Whatever happened next, she would accept it. Lorenzo exhaled slowly. His mind calculated consequences. Without the engagement, years of negotiations could collapse. Families might return to war. Thousands depended on the alliance. Claire was brilliant. She could easily find another executive position. Someone with her intelligence would never struggle for employment. He convinced himself this decision was practical, necessary, temporary. Finally, he spoke. Claire. His voice sounded strangely distant. I think. He paused. It's time you moved on. The words landed harder than any shouted accusation ever could. Claire held his gaze for several long seconds. Then, she smiled. A small, gentle, heartbreaking smile. I understand. There was no bitterness, no argument. She simply reached into her pocket, removed her security badge, her encrypted phone, her biometric access card. One after another, she placed them neatly on his desk. Everything remained perfectly organized. Even her resignation. She picked up her handbag, straightened her jacket, then looked at Lorenzo one final time. Thank you for trusting me these past 4 years. His chest tightened unexpectedly. Something inside him wanted to stop her, to explain, to apologize, to ask her not to leave. Instead, he remained silent. Claire nodded respectfully. Take care of yourself, boss. Then she walked toward the door. Her footsteps echoed softly through the executive floor. Employees looked up from their desks as she passed. Some smiled politely. None understood what was happening. The elevator doors closed. Claire disappeared from DeLuca headquarters without looking back. Inside Lorenzo's office, an unbearable silence settled over the room. Vanessa believed she had won. Lorenzo believed he had made the responsible choice. Neither realized. The heartbeat of the DeLuca empire had just walked out the front door. The first mistake seemed too small to matter. At exactly 9 o'clock the following morning, Lorenzo arrived at Pier 12, expecting a confidential meeting with a Japanese shipping consortium. No one was there. Only after 20 frustrating minutes did Marco, one of his capos, receive a frantic phone call. The delegation had been waiting at Pier 9 for nearly an hour. 3 miles away. Both locations had been listed in different versions of the day's itinerary. Lorenzo frowned. Who approved the final schedule? Everyone looked at each other. No one knew. Claire had always verified every version before sunrise. No one had realized she was the final safeguard against human error. By noon, the incident was dismissed as an unfortunate misunderstanding. By evening, another mistake happened. A convoy carrying confidential financial records departed an hour later than planned. Not because the drivers were careless, because 2 department heads had each assumed the other had confirmed the departure time. Claire had always coordinated both teams. Neither department even knew she had been doing it. The delay forced the convoy into rush-hour traffic. Federal surveillance drones detected unusual movement. The shipment reached its destination safely, but 3 intelligence agencies now possessed fresh footage of vehicles they had never managed to track before. A week earlier, that would never have happened. Inside headquarters, the atmosphere slowly changed. Phones rang longer before someone answered. Executives interrupted each other during meetings. Departments began requesting information they once received automatically. Small problems multiplied. 1 forgotten password, 1 unsigned authorization, 1 missing customs document. None were catastrophic. Together, they became chaos. Lorenzo worked later each night, trying to solve issues that had never existed before. He blamed exhaustion, growing responsibilities, the pressure of his engagement. He never once connected everything to Claire's absence. Not yet. 3 days later, a disaster no one could ignore finally arrived. Representatives from 2 influential mafia families appeared at different safe houses for the same strategic negotiation. Both believed they had received the correct location. Both carried heavily armed security teams. Neither trusted the other. Within minutes, weapons were drawn. Only the desperate intervention of several senior capos prevented bloodshed. When Lorenzo learned what had happened, rage spread across the conference room. Who distributed the meeting coordinates? Silence. Finally, someone answered. The scheduling department. They insist they followed protocol. Another executive interrupted. So did intelligence. So did security. Every department possessed a different version. Lorenzo slammed his fist onto the conference table. This never happened before. No one dared answer. Because everyone knew the truth. It had never happened before. That evening, the chief financial officer entered Lorenzo's office carrying 3 thick binders. "I need your signature." Lorenzo barely looked up. "Leave them. They're already overdue." Lorenzo frowned. Claire never allowed overdue paperwork. The words escaped naturally. The executive hesitated. No, she didn't. An uncomfortable silence followed. The CFO quietly left. For the first time, Lorenzo noticed how often Claire's name appeared in ordinary conversations. Not because people missed her personally. Because they kept encountering problems she used to solve before anyone noticed them. Within a week, the impossible became routine. A private aircraft landed at the wrong airport because flight plans had never been cross-checked. An overseas banking transfer remained frozen after 1 missing verification code delayed authorization. A confidential dinner with 3 governors ended awkwardly because no one informed the kitchen about 1 guest's severe allergy. Lorenzo apologized personally. Claire would have remembered. A luxury hotel launched an international event using outdated guest lists. The marketing division blamed administration. Administration blamed legal. Legal blamed security. Security blamed operations. Operations blamed everyone. The empire continued functioning, but only barely. The smooth precision that once made the DeLuca organization legendary had vanished. Then came the resignations. Managers began arguing openly. Department heads accused each other of incompetence. Capos questioned whether headquarters still deserved complete trust. Rumors spread through every level of the organization. Something feels different. We've lost our edge. Someone important must have left. No one outside headquarters knew who. Most assumed Lorenzo had replaced one executive with another. No one imagined the source of the collapse had once sat behind a modest desk outside his office. Vanessa noticed Lorenzo changing. He became quieter, more impatient. Dinner conversations ended after only a few minutes because another emergency phone call interrupted them. Twice he cancelled engagement appointments. 3 times he forgot social events she considered important. One evening she confronted him. "You're distracted. I've been busy. You've always been busy. This is different." Lorenzo rubbed his forehead. "Everything keeps going wrong." Vanessa folded her arms. "So hire better people." "I already am." "Then why are you still worried?" He wanted to answer immediately. Instead, he found himself staring through the office window, because deep inside, he already knew the answer. He simply refused to say it aloud. Over the next 2 weeks, he hired 3 executive assistants. The first possessed impeccable corporate credentials. She resigned after 5 exhausting days. "I can't keep up." The second came from a multinational investment bank. "I don't understand how one person handled all of this." Lorenzo looked up. "What do you mean?" She spread dozens of files across his desk. "I've mapped every responsibility assigned to this position. There are over 300 recurring tasks. Nearly half aren't written anywhere. They only exist because someone remembered them." She opened another folder. "I've discovered handwritten notes. No instructions. Just names, birthdays, medication, private preferences, backup contacts." She shook her head in disbelief. "This isn't administrative work. This is..." She searched for the right words. Operational architecture. Before leaving, she asked one final question. "Who worked here before me?" Lorenzo answered quietly. "Claire Sullivan." The woman nodded slowly. "I've never met her. But whoever she is, your empire wasn't running because of procedures. It was running because she already knew what everyone would need before they needed it." After she left, the office became painfully silent. That night, long after midnight, Lorenzo unlocked Claire's former office. No one had entered since the day she resigned. Her desk remained perfectly organized, pens aligned precisely. Empty coffee mug washed and returned to its usual place. A small calendar still rested beside her keyboard. He opened the top drawer. Inside, he expected ordinary office supplies. Instead, he found dozens of handwritten notebooks, each carefully labeled by year, by department, by operation. He opened one at random. Inside were notes unlike anything he had ever seen. "Remind Marco not to schedule negotiations after long flights. He becomes impatient. Governor Hayes pretends not to like desserts, but always accepts lemon tart. Boss forgets annual medical exams every spring. If weather delays Port 7, reroute through Norfolk before anyone asks." Another notebook. "Enrico's men always increase surveillance before major summits. Move security rotation 2 hours earlier." Another. "If Lorenzo skips lunch twice in one day, cancel evening appointments. He won't admit he's exhausted." Lorenzo stopped reading. His hands trembled slightly. These weren't instructions. They weren't reports. They weren't administrative records. They were 4 years of quiet observation. 4 years of anticipating problems before they existed. 4 years of protecting him. Without ever asking for recognition, he slowly closed the notebook, then whispered into the empty office, "What have I done?" For the first time since Claire walked away, Lorenzo finally understood the truth. She had never followed his orders. She had been thinking 5 moves ahead, every single day, And without realizing it, he had built an empire that depended on the one person he believed could be replaced.
For nearly 3 weeks after Claire's resignation, the DeLuca Empire operated like a magnificent ship drifting toward hidden reefs. From the outside, nothing seemed different. The luxury hotels remained fully booked. Cargo vessels continued crossing the Atlantic. Politicians still requested private meetings with Lorenzo. The casinos still generated millions every weekend. To the public, the empire remained untouchable. Only those inside headquarters could see the cracks spreading beneath the polished surface. Every morning began with another unexpected emergency. Every evening ended with another preventable disaster. And every problem seemed to whisper the same name. Claire, hundreds of miles away. Another man watched everything with growing fascination, Enrico Moretti. Unlike most rival mafia bosses, Enrico never underestimated his enemies. He believed every successful empire hid one invisible weakness. His entire career had been devoted to discovering Lorenzo De Lucas. For years, he had reached the same conclusion everyone else accepted. Lorenzo himself, his intelligence, his leadership, his fearlessness. That had to be the answer. Until his spies delivered an unusual report. A woman had quietly resigned from DeLuca headquarters. Within days, the organization's flawless efficiency had begun collapsing. At first, Enrico laughed. "You're telling me an assistant caused this?" His intelligence chief slid another folder across the table. Not just any assistant. Photographs, employment records, internal schedules, security observations collected over 4 years. One image showed Claire arriving before sunrise. Another captured her leaving well after midnight. A third revealed Lorenzo unconsciously handing her confidential files before anyone else. The final page contained a single handwritten note from an undercover source. "Boss trusts her more than anyone alive." Enrico leaned back. For several long minutes, he said nothing. Then, a slow smile appeared. "I've been hunting the wrong person." The investigation intensified immediately. Private detectives, corporate analysts, cyber specialists, former intelligence officers. Enrico wanted to know everything about Claire Sullivan. The reports surprised everyone. No luxury apartment, no extravagant spending, no hidden bank accounts, no expensive vacations, no suspicious relationships. She lived quietly in a modest apartment overlooking the Hudson River. She shopped at neighborhood grocery stores, volunteered twice a month at a community kitchen, visited an elderly neighbor every Sunday. She had never accepted gifts from Lorenzo beyond the occasional birthday cake or holiday bonus. 4 years inside one of America's most powerful criminal organizations. Yet she had never exploited her position for personal gain. Enrico frowned. Either she's incredibly naive, he paused, or she's the most loyal employee I've ever seen. Meanwhile, Claire was discovering something she had almost forgotten. Silence. For the first time in years. She woke naturally, instead of to multiple alarms. She drank coffee while it was still hot. She walked through Central Park without answering encrypted phones every 5 minutes. The world seemed strangely peaceful. Yet, the peace felt incomplete. Her body had finally rested. Her heart had not. Each morning she instinctively reached for the work phone that no longer existed. Every afternoon, she wondered whether Lorenzo had remembered to eat lunch. Every evening, she caught herself checking weather reports for shipping routes she no longer managed. Old habits refused to disappear. Love, especially unspoken love, rarely obeyed logic. One rainy afternoon, a black luxury sedan stopped outside her apartment. 2 impeccably dressed men stepped onto the sidewalk. Neither wore visible weapons, Neither needed to. Their confidence revealed exactly who they represented. Claire already knew. She opened the apartment door before they knocked. "I assume Mr. Moretti sent you." The older man smiled politely. "He'll be pleased you recognized us. I've spent 4 years recognizing people before they introduced themselves." He nodded. "That explains many things." An hour later, Claire entered one of Manhattan's most exclusive private clubs. Enrico Moretti waited beside a fireplace overlooking the city skyline. Unlike Lorenzo, Enrico smiled easily. His voice carried warmth instead of authority. "Miss Sullivan, Mr. Moretti, I appreciate you accepting my invitation. You didn't give me much choice." He laughed. "I respect honesty." Dinner was served. Expensive wine remained untouched by Claire. She listened patiently while Enrico outlined an offer unlike anything she had ever imagined. Chief Operations Executive, complete authority over logistics, unlimited resources, a salary exceeding $10 million annually, private security, luxury residence, a seat beside him in every strategic meeting. Finally, he leaned forward. "I don't need another assistant. I need the woman who made Lorenzo De Luca impossible to defeat." Claire remained perfectly calm. "You've done your homework." "I always do." "So did I." She gently folded the written contract, then pushed it back across the table. "I'm declining." Enrico blinked. "You haven't even considered it." "I considered it before arriving. You'd have everything." Claire smiled sadly. "No. I'd have everything except peace." Enrico studied her carefully. "After everything Lorenzo did, you still won't leave him behind?" Claire looked toward the rain-covered windows. "I already left." "Then why protect him?" Her answer came quietly. "Because loyalty isn't something you practice only when it's convenient." The words lingered between them. For the first time, even Enrico seemed impressed. "You love him." Claire remained silent. Silence itself became the answer. Enrico sighed. "I almost admire that." Almost. Days later, another intelligence report reached Enrico's desk. Lorenzo's organization continued struggling. Several major contracts had already been delayed. Political negotiations were becoming increasingly unstable. One advisor smiled confidently. "We should attack now." Enrico shook his head. "No." The room fell silent. "They're already bleeding." "So?" "I don't want damaged assets." He stood and walked toward the window. "I want Claire." His advisors exchanged confused glances. One finally asked, "If she refuses to work for us?" Enrico answered without turning around. "Then we'll create circumstances where Lorenzo has no choice." That same week, Claire accepted a temporary consulting position with a non-profit organization that coordinated emergency disaster relief. Compared to the mafia world, the work seemed wonderfully ordinary. Medical supply chains, volunteer schedules, food distribution. For the first time in years, people thanked her openly. No encrypted meetings, no political conspiracies, no hidden agendas, just people trying to help other people. Her new supervisor quickly noticed something remarkable. Within 5 days, distribution delays disappeared, inventory errors dropped to 0, volunteer retention improved dramatically. One elderly coordinator laughed. "It's like you can predict problems before they happen." Claire smiled. "I've had a lot of practice." She never mentioned where. Across the city, Lorenzo received another report. Another delayed shipment. Another failed negotiation. Another capo accusing another department of incompetence. He barely listened. His thoughts had begun wandering elsewhere. Everywhere he looked, he saw reminders of Claire. The untouched coffee mug in the executive kitchen, the empty chair outside his office, the notebooks he now read almost every night. One particular page refused to leave his mind. If Boss ever begins solving every problem himself, he'll stop seeing the people quietly solving them for him. He closed the notebook slowly. She had understood him, better than he understood himself. Late that evening, a secure phone inside Enrico's mansion rang once. His intelligence chief spoke without greeting. "We've confirmed her weekly routine." Enrico asked only one question. "Any security?" "None. She believes she's no longer part of the Mafia world." Another long silence. Then Enrico spoke quietly. "If she won't come willingly," his expression hardened, "we'll make someone else come for her." He ended the call. Outside, a thunderstorm rolled across the city. Far away, Claire walked home carrying groceries, completely unaware that several vehicles had already begun following her at a careful distance. The hunt had begun, and for the first time, she wasn't the one who saw the danger coming first.
The invitation arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. Every Mafia family on the East Coast had received the same encrypted message. No signatures, no explanations, only a time, a location, and a warning. Attendance was mandatory. Within hours, speculation spread through every criminal organization in America. Some believed a new alliance was forming. Others anticipated open war. Only Lorenzo sensed something far more dangerous. Nothing about the invitation felt normal. Then, his secure phone rang. Only 5 people in the world possessed that number. One of them was already dead. Another had retired years ago. The caller said only 3 words. "Turn on television." The line disconnected. Every screen inside DeLuca headquarters switched to the same encrypted broadcast. Static flickered briefly. Then, a warehouse appeared. Dark, cold, silent. A single chair stood beneath an overhead light. Someone sat tied to it, head lowered, wrists restrained. Hair partially covering her face. Claire. The room inside headquarters froze. Even veteran capos, who had survived decades of bloodshed, felt their stomachs tighten. The camera slowly zoomed closer. Bruises marked Claire's wrists. Her breathing remained steady, her expression calm, as though she had already accepted whatever came next. Then, Enrico Moretti stepped into view. Perfectly dressed, perfectly composed. He looked directly into the camera. "Lorenzo." His voice echoed across every screen. "I spent years believing your greatest weapon was fear." He smiled. I was wrong. He rested one hand lightly on Claire's shoulder. It was loyalty. Another pause. "So here's my offer." He leaned closer. "Come alone. No soldiers. No snipers. No surveillance. No negotiations. If anyone follows you." He gently lifted Claire's chin toward the camera. "She dies." The transmission ended. No coordinates. No countdown. Only silence. The conference room erupted instantly. "It's a trap. We mobilize every crew. We call the Romano family. We strike first." Marco slammed both hands against the table. "Boss, you cannot go." Another capo nodded. "If you walk in there alone, every rival family will move against us." A third spoke even more bluntly. "They didn't kidnap Claire. They kidnapped the Empire." Lorenzo listened without speaking, then quietly stood. The room immediately fell silent. He removed the gold signet ring that represented his authority as head of the DeLuca family. He placed it on the conference table. Next came his encrypted phone, then his sidearm, his shoulder holster. The emergency access card to every DeLuca vault. One by one, the symbols of his power disappeared. Marco stared in disbelief. "What are you doing?" Lorenzo answered calmly. If I die... He looked around the room. You'll know what to do. No. Marco's voice cracked. We're not letting you throw your life away. Lorenzo turned toward the men who had followed him through wars, betrayals, and impossible victories. You've all spent years telling me I'd built an unstoppable empire. He smiled sadly. The truth. I couldn't even protect the one person who protected all of us. Without another word. He walked out. No one tried to stop him, because they finally understood. This was no longer business. An hour later, a black sedan rolled into an abandoned shipyard on the edge of the harbor. Rusted cranes towered above silent warehouses. Fog drifted across broken concrete. The place felt abandoned. Too abandoned. Lorenzo stepped from the vehicle alone. No weapon. No body armor. No escort. Only quiet determination. Several floodlights suddenly ignited. Dozens of armed men emerged from the darkness. Sniper lasers painted red dots across his chest. Metal doors groaned open. Enrico walked forward slowly, applauding. I have to admit, I'm impressed. You actually came. Lorenzo stopped 20 feet away. Release her. Enrico laughed. So direct. He gestured toward Claire. She remained bound to a steel chair inside the warehouse. Despite everything, her first concern wasn't herself. Her eyes searched Lorenzo desperately. Why did you come? He answered with a tiny shake of his head. Don't worry. Enrico circled Lorenzo like a professor studying an interesting experiment. I've spent years trying to destroy your empire. You know what I discovered? He smiled. It was never your empire. He pointed toward Claire. It was hers. Lorenzo said nothing. Enrico continued. I offered her everything. Power. Wealth. Freedom. She refused. He shook his head in genuine disbelief. People like her shouldn't exist. Lorenzo looked directly at Claire. No, they should. Enrico sighed dramatically. So, tell me. He stepped closer. You surrendered everything. For an assistant. Lorenzo finally met his eyes. His voice remained calm. Steady. Certain. No. He looked toward Claire again. For the woman, I was too blind to realize had become my home. Time seemed to stop. Claire closed her eyes. One silent tear escaped, despite every effort to remain composed. For 4 years, she had buried every feeling, every hope, every impossible dream. She had convinced herself she expected nothing. Yet hearing those words, she realized part of her heart had never truly given up. Enrico clapped slowly. Beautiful, tragic, and completely useless. He raised one hand. Gunfire exploded. Lorenzo dove sideways as bullets shattered concrete. Hidden shooters emerged from the upper catwalks. Smoke grenades filled the warehouse. Chaos erupted instantly. Enrico's men opened fire from every direction. Lorenzo fought with nothing except instinct. He disarmed the nearest attacker, rolled behind steel containers, returned fire using a weapon knocked loose during the struggle. Above, Claire forced herself to breathe. Don't panic. Observe. Think. Just as she always had. Even tied to a chair, her mind never stopped working. She scanned the warehouse. Entrances, exits, guard rotations, sightlines. Then, she noticed something no one else had. A faint glint of sunlight reflecting from broken glass high above the loading cranes. Not glass, a rifle scope, hidden sniper, watching Lorenzo, waiting for the perfect shot. Claire twisted violently against the restraints. The chair tipped backward. Wood splintered. One wrist slipped partially free. Ignoring the pain, she reached the sharp edge of broken metal beneath the overturned chair and cut through the remaining restraints. At that exact moment, the sniper squeezed the trigger. Claire screamed. "Lorenzo!" He turned instinctively. The flash above caught his attention. Without thinking, he dropped flat. The bullet ripped through the air where his head had been a fraction of a second earlier. Lorenzo fired immediately toward the rooftop. The hidden sniper collapsed. Everything changed. Seeing their concealed marksman eliminated, Enrico's forces lost coordination. Marco and the De Luca capos, who had disobeyed Lorenzo's orders and secretly surrounded the harbor from a distance, seized the opportunity. Armored vehicles smashed through the warehouse entrances, the air filled with deafening gunfire. Within minutes, Enrico's carefully planned ambush collapsed into complete disorder. Realizing defeat was inevitable, Enrico attempted to escape through an underground tunnel. He never made it. Marco intercepted him at the exit. For the first time in years, the feared rival Mafia Boss lowered his weapon. His empire was finished. As emergency crews secured the warehouse, Lorenzo found Claire sitting against a steel pillar, exhausted but conscious. Without hesitation, he crossed the room. Neither spoke. Words suddenly felt too small. He simply knelt before her, wrapped both arms around her, and held her as though letting go might cause the entire world to disappear again. Claire slowly returned the embrace. "I thought," her voice trembled, "you'd choose the Empire." Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. "I already did once." His eyes filled with regret. "I'll never make that mistake again." Around them, the last echoes of gunfire faded into silence. For the first time since Claire walked away from De Luca headquarters, neither power, nor politics, nor fear mattered anymore. Only the two people who had finally found each other. 3 weeks later, the De Luca headquarters no longer felt like a battlefield. Broken systems had been repaired. Supply routes flowed smoothly once again. International negotiations resumed. The luxury hotels returned to full occupancy. Financial markets stabilized. Even the capos noticed something remarkable. The atmosphere had changed. Not simply because the crises had ended, because the people inside the organization had changed. For the first time, everyone understood how close they had come to losing everything, and why. Claire had returned, but not to her old position. The brass nameplate outside Lorenzo's office no longer read, Executive Assistant. Instead, it read, Chief Operations Officer. The decision surprised many executives. None dared question it. After witnessing weeks of collapse followed by immediate recovery, the evidence spoke louder than titles ever could. Claire refused a larger office. She declined unnecessary luxury. She kept the same modest desk she had used for 4 years, asking only that it be moved inside the Executive Operations Suite, where every department could collaborate more efficiently. When one manager joked that she finally had the authority she deserved, Claire smiled. Authority isn't what keeps people working together. What does? She looked around the room. Trust. The answer spread quietly through the organization. People who had once overlooked her now sought her advice before making important decisions, not because Lorenzo demanded it, because they had finally witnessed the value of quiet competence. Vanessa Romano officially announced the cancellation of the engagement. The political consequences everyone had feared never arrived. Several mafia families privately admitted they respected Lorenzo's decision. A leader willing to sacrifice power for loyalty was more trustworthy than one who sacrificed loyalty for power. Even influential politicians who had questioned Lorenzo's judgment began seeing him differently. One elderly senator commented during a private dinner, "Empires survive because of capable people. Kings survive because they know who those people are." Lorenzo never forgot those words. News of Enrico Moretti's downfall spread rapidly through the underworld. His organization fractured within days. Former allies abandoned him. Businesses changed ownership. Territories were absorbed into competing families. Yet Lorenzo claimed almost none of it. When Marco questioned the decision, Lorenzo answered simply, "We've spent enough time chasing power. It's time we start protecting what already matters." The capos exchanged surprised glances. Months earlier, none of them could have imagined hearing those words from the most feared mafia boss on the East Coast. Life slowly settled into a new rhythm. Every morning, Lorenzo still arrived with an impossible schedule waiting on his desk. Coffee still appeared before he requested it. Meetings still unfolded with effortless precision. The difference, he finally noticed. One afternoon, he walked into Claire's office carrying 2 cups of coffee. She looked up from a stack of reports. "You remembered." He smiled. "I've been trying to remember more things." She laughed softly. "You've improved. I have an excellent teacher." They spent several quiet minutes reviewing schedules together. Not as boss and assistant, as equals. When disagreements appeared, they discussed them openly. Sometimes Claire convinced Lorenzo. Sometimes Lorenzo convinced Claire. Neither cared who won, only that the right decision was made. For the first time, neither of them carried the burden alone. Autumn arrived. Golden leaves covered the long driveway leading toward the historic DeLuca estate. Hundreds of luxury vehicles lined the entrance. Helicopters landed one after another. Private security teams stood at every checkpoint. The largest gathering in DeLuca family history had begun. Capos from across the East Coast filled the grand ballroom. Political leaders, international business executives, foreign investors, representatives from rival families. Every influential figure who mattered was present. Rumors spread quickly. Some expected Lorenzo to announce a major expansion. Others believed he would reveal new political alliances. No one guessed the truth. As the orchestra fell silent, Lorenzo stepped onto the stage. The room immediately quieted. He wore a simple black suit. No elaborate decorations, no display of wealth, only quiet confidence. Behind him stood a massive screen displaying photographs from the DeLuca organization through the years. Shipping ports, hotels, construction projects, international conferences, successful negotiations, the visible history of an empire. Lorenzo looked across the audience, then began speaking. For years, people have called me a visionary. A few guests smiled politely. They've praised my leadership, my decisions, my ambition. He paused. The truth is far less impressive. Confused whispers spread through the ballroom. Lorenzo turned toward the enormous screen. The photographs changed. Instead of buildings, instead of ships, instead of billion-dollar projects, a single photograph appeared. Claire, sitting quietly behind her desk, working late at night, completely unaware anyone had taken the picture. The ballroom became silent. Lorenzo smiled gently. 4 years ago, this woman stood quietly beside me. Most people in this room never learned her name. Another photograph appeared. Claire organizing emergency files before sunrise. Then another, helping an elderly employee carry heavy boxes. Then another, sleeping briefly over paperwork during an all-night crisis before waking to continue working. One by one, the invisible moments that had built the empire appeared before everyone. Lorenzo looked directly at the audience. Everyone believed I built this organization. He shook his head. No, I simply had the privilege of standing beside the woman who kept it alive. Every capo stood, one after another, not because protocol required it, because respect demanded it. The applause echoed through the hall for nearly a full minute. Claire remained frozen, her eyes filled with tears. For years, she had never expected recognition. Now, an entire empire stood because of her. Lorenzo stepped down from the stage. Slowly, he walked toward Claire. The ballroom became so quiet that every footstep could be heard across the marble floor. Claire looked at him in complete disbelief. "Lorenzo," he smiled. "No titles today." When he reached her, he reached into his jacket. The room collectively held its breath. He lowered himself onto one knee, not before politicians, not before rival mafia families, not before billionaires, before the woman who had quietly sacrificed 4 years of her life without asking for anything in return. He opened a small velvet box. Inside rested an elegant engagement ring. Nothing extravagant, simply beautiful. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed every emotion he had spent years hiding. "Claire Sullivan. I spent years believing strength meant never needing anyone. I was wrong. I thought I was protecting an empire, when all along, you were protecting me." A tear slipped down Claire's cheek. Lorenzo continued, "You never asked me to notice. You never asked for credit. You never asked to be loved." He smiled softly. "And somehow, you gave me all three." He took a slow breath. "Will you stop being the woman who stands behind my desk and become the woman who stands beside me for the rest of our lives?" The ballroom disappeared. The applause, the cameras, the powerful families, the billions of dollars. None of it existed anymore. Only him, only her. Claire laughed through her tears. The same quiet laugh Lorenzo had heard only a handful of times in 4 years. She reached down, placed both hands around his, and whispered the answer she had carried inside her heart for far too long. Yes. The room erupted. Applause thundered through the ballroom. Even hardened capos, who had spent decades hiding every emotion, smiled openly. Marco wiped at his eyes before pretending something had irritated them. Lorenzo slipped the ring onto Claire's finger, then rose and embraced her. Not as his employee, not as the woman who saved his empire, but as the woman who had finally come home. Months later, life inside the DeLuca organization continued with its familiar rhythm. Only now, whenever new employees entered headquarters, they noticed something unusual. Outside the executive office hung 2 identical nameplates. Lorenzo DeLuca, Executive Chairman. Beside it, Claire Sullivan, Chief Operations Officer. No title mentioned assistant. No plaque celebrated sacrifice. It no longer needed to. Everyone already knew the story. They knew that the plus-size woman once dismissed as just a secretary had become the most respected leader in the organization, not through beauty, wealth, or fear, but through unwavering loyalty, extraordinary intelligence, quiet sacrifice, and a heart that never stopped protecting others. And Lorenzo finally understood the greatest lesson of his life. The most valuable empire he would ever build was never made of ports, hotels, casinos, or billions of dollars. It was built one quiet act of trust at a time, beside the woman who had silently held his world together, until he learned to hold hers in return.